Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
You woke up one morning and didn't recognize your own life. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way they make movies about. It was quieter than that, more unsettling. You were standing in your kitchen, maybe the same kitchen you've stood in for 20 years, and the coffee was brewing, and the light was coming through the window the way it always does, and everything looked exactly the same. And something inside you whispered, "This isn't it. This can't be all of it." You didn't say it out loud. Of course you didn't. Because women like us, we don't say things like that out loud. We have people who need us. We have responsibilities that don't pause for an existential crisis. We have a voice in our heads that has spent decades telling us that what we feel is too much, or not enough, or simply not appropriate right now. So you poured the coffee, and you kept going. But that whisper didn't go away, did it? Here's what nobody tells you about being a woman in your 50s, 60s, or beyond. Nobody tells you that this season of life, the one they dress up in soft, focused retirement commercials and cheerful magazine spreads, can feel like standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and completely unnamed. They hand you a script when you're young. Go to school. Build a career or build a family or build both while quietly running on fumes and calling it strength. Love people. Show up. Shrink yourself when the room feels too small for everyone's needs and yours. And then one day, one ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday, you look up from that script and realize you've reached the last page, and no one wrote what comes next. That's not failure. I want you to hear that clearly, because I know the voice in your head might be whispering otherwise. That disorientation you feel, that hollow ache that lies somewhere beneath your sternum, that's not weakness. That's not ingratitude. That's awakening. And awakening, in my experience, almost always feels like loss before it feels like freedom. I've sat with hundreds of women navigating this exact crossing. And what strikes me every single time is how alone they feel in it. How convinced they are that everyone else has figured something out that they somehow missed. That their friends are fine. That their sisters are fine. That the women at church or book club or yoga are all holding it together in ways they simply cannot. They're not. They're just carrying the same unspoken truths behind the same practiced smiles. Because we were taught so carefully, so thoroughly, that a woman who has doubt is a woman who is broken. And so we protect each other from our own realness. We meet for lunch and talk about our grandchildren and our gardens and the trip someone took to Portugal. And we go home full of food and somehow starving. We are starving for a conversation that starts with me too. I feel it too. I thought it was just me. So let me start it. I feel it too. There came a point in my own life when everything that had defined me, the roles I played, the needs I met, the identity I had stitched together from decades of loving and striving and doing, started to feel like a coat that no longer fit. Not because the coat was wrong. It was a beautiful coat. It served me well. But I had grown in directions that coat was never sewn to hold, and I didn't know who I was without it. That's the weight we carry into this season, isn't it? Not just the grief of what's changed. The empty nest, the aging body, the friendships that have quietly drifted, the parents we've lost or are losing, the careers that are winding down, or the ones we wonder if we should have chosen differently. It's not just the grief of all that. It's the deeper, stranger grief of not knowing who you are when you're no longer primarily defined by what you do for everyone else. Who are you when you're not someone's mother in the urgent, daily way you once were? Who are you when you're not building towards something? A degree, a promotion, a milestone. Who are you when the house gets quiet and stays quiet, and the quiet starts to ask you questions you've been too busy to answer for 30 years? That's the real terrain of midlife. Not the wrinkles, not the hormones, though Lord knows those deserve their own conversation. The real terrain is identity. It's the sacred, sometimes terrifying work of asking, who am I now? And who do I want to become before my story is done? These aren't small questions. They deserve more than a self-help checklist or a weekend retreat or a motivational quote on a coffee mug. They deserve you. Your full, honest, courageous attention. And they deserve a conversation that honors the full complexity of what you've lived. The sacrifices that were worth it, the ones that weren't, The dreams you set down so gently you almost didn't notice, and the ones still flickering somewhere in that quiet inner sanctuary you rarely let yourself visit. That's where we're going together. Not to fix you, because you are not broken. To find you. The you that was always there, waiting patiently beneath every role you ever played. She's still there. I promise you that. Let's talk about what's actually going on beneath the surface. Because I think you deserve more than someone patting your hand and saying this is just a phase, or you'll find your groove again, or my personal least favorite. Have you tried gratitude journaling? As if the achy you're carrying could be solved by a prettier morning routine. What's happening to you is real. It's neurological, it's psychological, it's deeply, profoundly human. And once you understand it, not just feel it, but truly understand it, something shifts. The fear loses a little of its grip. The confusion starts to organize itself into something you can actually work with. So let's go there together. There's a concept that the great psychologist Carl Jung wrote about, and I want to offer it to you not as a clinical term, but as a kind of permission slip. He called it individuation. The process by which a person moves from living according to the expectations and definitions placed on them by the world toward living from their own deep, authentic center. He believed, and decades of psychological research have echoed this, that this process doesn't fully begin until midlife. Not because you weren't growing before. You were, enormously. But the first half of life, Jung argued, is largely about building a self that can function in the world. Building relationships, structures, identities, competencies. You were doing exactly what you were supposed to do. The second half of life is about something different. It's about deepening, about peeling back the constructed self to find the essential one. About asking not what does the world need from me, but what is true about me at my core that I haven't yet had the courage or the space to fully live. That transition, from building to deepening, is disorienting by design. It's supposed to feel like something is coming apart. Because something is. The scaffolding is coming down. And that's not a catastrophe. That's construction of a different, more interior kind. But here's where it gets complicated for women specifically. Because we were handed a particularly intricate set of scaffolding, weren't we? From the time we were small girls, we were taught, in 10,000 subtle and not so subtle ways, that our value lived in our usefulness to others, in our warmth, our availability, our ability to anticipate needs and smooth edges and hold space and show up and give from a well we were somehow expected to keep full while rarely being offered the time or permission to refill it. We became extraordinary at this. World-class really, and somewhere along the way that extraordinary competence became our identity. Being needed felt like being loved. Showing up for everyone felt like purpose. The business, the caregiving, the constant motion, it wasn't just what we did, it became who we were. So when that starts to change, when the children need us differently, when the career plateaus or ends, when the roles that organized our days begin to loosen their grip, we don't just feel purposeless. We feel erased. And that is a grief that doesn't get nearly enough acknowledgement in our culture. We talk about retirement parties and empty nest celebrations, and we put cheerful faces on these transitions as though they are purely joyful. But for so many women, there is a mourning happening underneath the celebration. A private, unwitnessed mourning for a version of themselves that served everyone beautifully and is now being gently asked to step aside. You are allowed to grieve that. You are allowed to feel the loss of a self that, even if it wasn't entirely your own choosing, was still yours. Still familiar. Still something you knew how to be. And then there's the body. Oh, let's not skip past the body, because she is speaking loudly in this season, isn't she? The hormonal shifts of perimenopause and menopause are not, I want to say this firmly, simply a medical inconvenience to be managed and minimized. They are part of a profound biological transition that our culture has stripped of all its meaning. Other cultures, older cultures, understood that the cessation of the reproductive cycle was not an ending but a transformation, the beginning of a new kind of power, a moving inward, a shift from external creation to internal wisdom. But we live in a world that has medicalized this passage, pathologized it, made women feel that their changing bodies are malfunctioning rather than transforming. And so we absorb that message. We feel broken when we should be feeling initiated. The sleeplessness, the emotional intensity, the sudden surfacing of old wounds and long-buried feelings. These aren't symptoms of something going wrong. They are, in many ways, your psyche and your body collaborating, bringing things to the surface that need tending, old stories that need rewriting, grief that was deferred, joy that was postponed, anger, quiet, legitimate, important anger that was swallowed so many times it nearly disappeared. It didn't disappear. It's here now. And it's asking for your attention. I want to tell you about a woman I worked with. I'll call her Carol, though that's not her name. Carol came to me at 61, convinced she was depressed. She had every reason the world might accept for seeking help. Her husband had retired, her routine had collapsed, her last child had moved across the country. She said to me, in our very first session, with this look of genuine bewilderment on her face, I have everything I ever wanted. Why do I feel like I'm disappearing? We spent the better part of a year on that question. And what we discovered, slowly, carefully, the way you uncover something fragile buried in soil, was that Carol had never, not once in 61 years, asked herself what she wanted. Not in any real, sustained, self-honoring way. She had wanted things for people. She had wanted safety and health and success for her children. She had wanted peace and partnership for her marriage. She had wanted recognition and stability in her career. But Carol herself, the woman at the center of all that wanting, had remained largely unknown to Carol. She wasn't disappearing. She was, for the first time, becoming possible. That's what I want you to sit with as we move forward. This unraveling you're experiencing, this disorientation, this grief, this strange mixture of relief and terror, it's not the end of your story. It's the end of the first draft. And anyone who has ever written anything true knows that the first draft is never the whole truth. It's just the beginning of finding out what you really have to say. You have so much more to say. The question is whether you'll give yourself permission to say it. So here we are. You understand now that what you're feeling isn't a malfunction. It isn't ingratitude or weakness or some quiet form of madness that you need to hide from the people who love you. It's a passage. One of the most significant passages a human being can move through. And you're in the middle of it. But understanding something intellectually and actually living your way through it, those are two very different things, aren't they? So let's talk about the turning. The actual, practical, sometimes messy, sometimes luminous work of finding your way back to yourself. Not the self you were at 30. Not the self someone else needs you to be. The self that has been quietly waiting with extraordinary patience for you to finally have room for her. Because she's been there all along. In the things that made you catch your breath. In the passions you set aside because the timing wasn't right and the timing was never right. In the moments, maybe rare, maybe more frequent than you realize, when you felt fully, completely, undeniably alive. We're going back to those moments. That's where she lives. The first thing I want to offer you, and I offer it not as a technique but as a practice of the soul, is what I call the art of honest inventory. Not a gratitude list. Not a highlight reel of everything you should appreciate. An honest inventory. The kind that requires you to sit down, perhaps with a cup of tea and a closed door and whatever measure of courage you can gather, and ask yourself some questions you may have been avoiding for a very long time. What did I love before I learned to be practical? What parts of myself did I quietly set aside to become who everyone needed me to be? And do I want to pick them back up? Where in my life am I performing contentment rather than actually feeling it? What would I do, who would I be, if I weren't afraid of disappointing someone? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations. And I want you to know that the answers don't have to be dramatic. They don't have to mean blowing up your life or moving to Italy or writing a manifesto. Sometimes the answer is as simple as I used to paint. I want to paint again. Or I've always wanted to learn to speak French. Or I want one afternoon a week that belongs entirely to me with no agenda and no apologies. Small things, sacred things, yours. The second practice, and this one requires a particular kind of bravery, is learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. We are fixers. Women of our generation were trained to be. Something feels wrong, you address it. Someone is hurting, you soothe it. A problem appears, you solve it. This instinct has made us capable beyond measure. It has also made it very difficult for us to simply be in uncertainty without frantically reaching for resolution. But here's what I've learned, both from my own life and from sitting with women in the most tender chapters of theirs: not all discomfort is a problem to be solved. Some discomfort is a doorway, and the only way through a doorway is to stop backing away from it and actually walk toward it. The restlessness you feel, walk toward it. Ask it what it wants. The grief that surfaces at unexpected moments, in the car, in the grocery store, in the middle of an ordinary Wednesday, don't swallow it back down. Let it move through you. Grief that is witnessed, even if the only witness is yourself, loses its power to quietly poison everything around it. The anger, if it's there, especially the anger. That anger is information. It's telling you where your boundaries were crossed and quietly accepted. Where you gave what wasn't freely given. Where you shrunk when you deserved to take up space. That anger, honored rather than suppressed, can become one of the most clarifying forces in your life. Feel it. All of it. Not forever, but long enough to let it tell you what it came to say. Now let's talk about something that I think is one of the most underestimated forces in a woman's midlife transformation. Community. Specifically, and I mean this with great tenderness and great seriousness, the right kind of community. Because here's what I've noticed about women in this season of life. Many of us are surrounded by people and still profoundly, etchingly lonely. We have acquaintances but few intimates. We have people who know our history but not our current, interior truth. We have relationships built on who we were, on shared roles and shared seasons that haven't evolved to hold who we are becoming, and we stay. We stay in those relationships, those social circles, those familiar configurations, because the alternative, the vulnerability of reaching for something more real, feels terrifying. What if they don't want to go deeper? What if we're too much? What if we've changed in ways that make us incompatible with the life we've carefully built? These are real fears. I won't dismiss them, but I will tell you this. One real conversation, one single exchange where you say something true and someone across from you says me too, is worth more to your soul than 100 lunches spent talking about nothing. You deserve that. You deserve to be known, not the curated, capable, holding it all together version. The full version, the doubting, yearning, still becoming version. Find your people, or allow your people, the ones already in your life who might be waiting for you to go first, to find you. Be the one who goes first. Say the true thing. It will feel like stepping off a ledge. It will feel almost immediately after like breathing. There's another piece of this turning that I want to name carefully because I think it gets mishandled so often. The question of purpose. Women in this season frequently come to me with a version of this fear: I've lost my purpose. I don't know what I'm here for anymore. And the cultural response to that fear is almost always to suggest they go find a new one. Start a business, volunteer, take up a cause, fill the space with doing, because doing is the only kind of purpose our culture really knows how to honor. But I want to offer you a different frame entirely. What if purpose in this season isn't primarily about what you do, but about how you are? What if your purpose right now is to become the most honest, most fully inhabited version of yourself? To model for your daughters and granddaughters and the younger women watching you that a woman does not disappear at 60. That she does not quietly fold herself into the margins of her own story. That she stands up in whatever way is authentic to her and says, I am still here. I am more here than I have ever been. That's not a small purpose. That's a revolutionary one. I also want to speak gently but directly about the inner sanctuary. Every woman I've ever worked with has one. A place inside herself that is quieter than the noise of her life. A place that holds her real preferences, her real dreams, her real knowing. But for most of the women I've sat with, that sanctuary has been largely unvisited. Not because they didn't want to go there, but because going there requires something that has always felt like a luxury they couldn't justify. Solitude. Stillness. Time that produces nothing measurable. I am here to tell you that this is not a luxury. It is a lifeline. Whether you find your way there through prayer, through walking, through sitting quietly with your morning coffee before anyone else wakes up, through meditation or journaling, or simply staring out a window without a screen in your hand, The practice of returning to your own interior is the most important thing you can do in this season. Not because you'll always find peace there. Sometimes you'll find grief or confusion or old regrets that need tending. But you will always find yourself there. And in this season of life, that finding is everything. You are not lost. You are in the process of being found. And there is a profound difference between those two things. One that changes everything about how you move through the days ahead. Don't rush it. Don't fix it. Don't perform your way through it. Live it. All of it. With as much honesty and grace and self-compassion as you can bring to bear. She's there. The woman you're becoming, she's been watching you do the work, carry the weight, love the people, hold the pieces together. And she is so ready for you to finally come home to her. I want to start this last part with something I need you to really hear. Not skim over. Not nod politely at, and then immediately forget because some other part of your brain is already composing a grocery list or worrying about something someone said to you last Tuesday. I need you to actually land in these words for a moment. You have more time than you think. I know that might sound like a platitude. I know that at 55 or 63 or 71, the cultural messaging you receive on a near daily basis is quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, suggesting the opposite. That you are winding down. That the significant chapters are behind you. That what remains is a kind of graceful diminishment, a slow and dignified retreat from the fullness of life. That messaging is a lie, and I want you to be done with it. Here is what the research actually tells us, and I don't say this to comfort you with statistics, but because the truth of it genuinely moves me every time I sit with it. Studies on psychological well-being across the human lifespan consistently show something that surprises people when they first encounter it. Happiness, real, deep, not dependent on circumstances happiness, tends to increase in the later decades of life. Not for everyone and not automatically, but for women who do the interior work, who allow themselves the full experience of this passage rather than numbing or rushing through it, who make even modest choices toward authenticity and self-honoring, life gets better. Not easier necessarily, not free of loss or limitation or the particular griefs that come with this territory, but richer, deeper, more saturated with meaning, more anchored in what actually matters and less cluttered with what never did. The women I've known who are thriving in their 60s and 70s and beyond share something in common that has nothing to do with their circumstances. It isn't money, or health, or whether their marriages are intact, or whether their children turned out the way they hoped. It's something more interior than any of that. They stopped waiting for permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to have preferences. Permission to say no to things that diminish them, and yes to things that make them feel alive. Permission to be complicated, to hold grief and joy simultaneously, to love their lives and still want them to be different, to be grateful and still be hungry for more. They stopped waiting for someone else to hand them that permission slip, and they wrote it themselves. That is what I'm asking you to do now. Not someday. Not when things settle down, or when you feel more ready, or when you've earned it through some additional measure of sacrifice or service. Now, as you are, exactly where you stand, let me tell you about the women who have quietly become my greatest teachers. Not the ones who had the dramatic reinventions, the ones who sold everything and moved to Costa Rica and started painting murals, though God bless them. Those women have their own magnificent story. I'm talking about the quieter transformations. The ones that happen in ordinary lives and go largely unnoticed by the outside world, but are utterly revolutionary on the inside. The woman who, at 67, told her family that Sunday dinners were becoming monthly instead of weekly, because she needed her Sundays back. And then kept that boundary even when it was uncomfortable, even when someone sulked. That woman changed her life. The woman who, at 58, enrolled in a creative writing class, who had never shown her writing to anyone, ever, in her entire life, who shook when she read her first piece aloud in class, who stayed anyway. That woman found a voice she'd been silencing for decades. The woman who, at 72, finally ended a friendship that had been slowly draining her for 30 years. Who grieved it enormously and felt guilty for months. Who then discovered, in the space that relationship had occupied, a quietness that gradually became peace. That woman chose herself, perhaps for the first time. None of these are small acts. Inside the lives of these women, they were seismic. They were the moment the earth shifted and everything